Hi, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm News 13's Amy Hoyt, and this is 13 Now. We are coming to you live from our News 13 newsroom on Harrison Avenue. You may have checked the calendar. You already know that today is the 13th of the month, and for us here at News 13, that means we go pink. It is Buddy Check Day, where we send out reminders for women and men, but mostly women who, because 1 in 8 will come down with breast cancer, will be diagnosed. So we want to remind you to check for lumps throughout the course of the month so that you can keep tabs on your health, and once you hit 40 to start to get a mammogram. We have a special guest with us today. Miss Kelly Roberson is a breast cancer survivor, and we appreciate her coming in today to share her story. But Kelly, let's start a little easy. Tell us about your life first. You're an attorney.
I am. I'm an attorney. I work at Perry & Young. I have a wonderful husband named Jim and two identical twin daughters who are 18 now and seniors at Bay and at North Bay Haven. Our lives mostly revolve around chasing them around and their activities and all the things that they do and are doing, college applications right now, all those things. But yeah, that's my life.
It's a busy season.
It is a busy season.
Now, things changed for you not long ago when you were diagnosed with breast cancer, but I know that we talked earlier, so I want to start at the beginning before we get to your diagnosis. You were really good about going and getting your mammogram with a friend.
I try. One of my best friends, Kim is her name, she is very, very good about taking care of her health, and she's on top of everything, but she has a real problem with radiation. She kind of thinks that it's bad for you, et cetera. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, we decided that we were going to start getting our mammograms together and kind of make a little bit of a spa as best it can be, because we all know it's just so unpleasant, but it's one of those things that you kind of just have to do and get through. But we decided to make it a little bit fun, and we went together. And this past August, I think, when I got my reminder card, I called her and she said, "I'm not doing it this year. I'm going to skip this year. I'm going to start doing it biannually." And I said, "Oh, Kim," I said, "you need to do it." And she said, "Nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it." And so, bless her heart, she called me about, I would say probably 10 days before I was actually scheduled, because I went ahead and scheduled myself. And she called me and she said, when are we doing our mammograms? And I said, "You told me you weren't going to do it, so I didn't schedule with you." So she said, "Oh, okay, I'll go schedule." And I said, "No, you won't." I said, "Let's get them on three-way right now." We got it scheduled. It got postponed from mid-October to early December for me, postponed for me, and put on the schedule for her. And that's when we found it. So
Found your lump when you got that mammogram. So
Correct.
you're talking about less than a year ago.
That's correct. It'll be, I think, December 16th was my diagnosis.
Wow. Okay, so you find the lump, or they find it in the mammogram. Did you find out the day of the mammogram?
I found out they did, I want to say they did an alternate screening on the day of the mammogram, and then ended up calling me back for something additional a few days later after the radiologist had read the additional screening. And then they called me back again, and we did the biopsy at that point. And I found out within about a week or so of the biopsy that it was, in fact, cancer.
All right, and then where do you go? First of all, let's back up a little bit. What did you feel? Were you in shock?
You know, we had all been through so much. I had family issues with health issues, and of course, you know, dealing with a hurricane and insurance and all the crazy stuff going on in our lives here locally. I actually told my boss, Larry Perry, I said, "There is no way that this is going to be cancer, because I cannot handle one more thing." And he said, "Be careful what you say." And I was like, okay. So when I got the diagnosis, I was at my office, and Dr. Steve Mullis, who's my wonderful physician, called me and said, "It's not good news." And I said, "Okay." And he told me what it was. Of course, I had never had to be educated on what all of this stuff was. And I just remember I was in the hallway, because I kind of stepped out of my office, because our walls are kind of thin in our office. And I kind of stepped out so I could talk to him without having to worry about anybody hearing me if I broke down or whatever. So I was in the hallway, and I remember just sinking to the floor and sitting there for about 5 minutes, processing, I think is the best word for it, processing and thinking, okay. And when I got up off the floor, I immediately made a phone call to my friend Mandy, who at that point I think had been diagnosed with breast cancer around 10 years before.
Wow.
And so she kind of had the the insight as to what to do. So I called her first, didn't call my husband, called Mandy, and I said, Mandy, it's bad news, because she knew I was awaiting the biopsy. Mandy, it's bad news. What do I do now? And she said, let me get you this number. And so she gave me the number for MD Anderson, for the breast center at MD Anderson. And I went back to my office and I got on the phone with them, and I think I got the diagnosis at about 3:46 in the afternoon, and by 5:15 I had an appointment at Anderson.
And that's out in Houston,
That's
Texas.
out in Houston, correct.
All right. And so then did you call your husband?
I actually had Anderson on hold, and I called him on my cell phone and said, honey, I've got bad news. I've got cancer. And he, of course, all the things.
Right.
And I said, I'm on the phone with MD Anderson. I'm making an appointment right now. And so I just jumped right on it and took the bull by the horns and said, we're going to go handle this. And of course, this is
Right.
a week before Christmas. So crazy.
How do you tell your daughters, who were 17 at the time?
They were 17 at the time, that's correct. Well, we hadn't said anything to them about the biopsies or anything, because I didn't see the need to worry them until there was something to actually worry about. So that night, when I got home, we sat them down and told them just flat out, I have cancer and this is what's going on. So
How did they react?
tears, fear, of course. All the things that you would expect with hearing a diagnosis. And of course, you hear the C word, and it's terrifying. Nobody ever wants to hear that, and especially, when you have sitting there looking at your babies. You don't
Right.
want to ever hear that word. So.
And at that point, you didn't think you had any family history, correct?
Correct. I do.
Turns out, right?
Turns out I do. Goodness.
They run a check on family members?
They did genetic testing on me, but that kind of came a little bit later. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so they initially scheduled me for like the week before Christmas to come out to Houston, and I called them back and I said, I've got to put this off a week. I've got Christmas to do. I just have got to get through this time, and then I can come out there. So my husband and I actually flew out on the 26th, the day after Christmas, on Boxing Day, and spent a week and something out there dealing with all the things. When I got out there, they had already scheduled me an appointment with the breast surgeon, the
Wow.
breast cancer surgeon, to do a lumpectomy. And they were basically playing the odds. And the odds are that it's going to be one of the three hormone-driven cancers, whether it's going to be HER2, estrogen, or progesterone. And I think the odds are, it's 85% of women who get breast cancer have one of those three, or sometimes a combination of those three. Unfortunately, I had triple negative, which means that my cancer was not a hormone receptor cancer for any of those hormones. And so it's kind of a little bit scarier. We didn't know that that's what it was when the appointment was made with the breast surgeon. And so when I got out there, she was a little embarrassed, to be quite honest with you, because she said, we were playing these odds, and you are not in this category. And so we kind of had to drop back, punt, and kind of regroup a little bit. So those people out there at Anderson are so amazing. We had this conversation in the office at whatever time I had my appointment with her, and she called me at about 6 o'clock that night. And my husband and I had gone home and kind of processed everything that she had said. And one of the things was that they were thinking about going ahead and throwing some chemo at me, just to see how the cancer reacted to it, because once you remove the cancer, you can't see whether it's going to respond to chemo. And so they were thinking that was kind of what they were going to do first when I left the office. And so my husband and I talked it over, and he said, what do you want out of this? And I said, well, I don't want to be a bad patient, number one, so I want to follow what they say. But if I had my choice, I would like to go ahead and get a lumpectomy right now. Let's get the thing knocked out, see what's in there, get the cancer out of my body. I don't want the cancer in my body. And so she called me back that night, and she had actually staffed my case with the oncologist, who I had not met yet, and they talked about it, and they both made the decision that they wanted to pull what was in there out so they could take a look at it and really, run it through the ringer that way, and also check my lymph nodes. And that was the other thing that I really wanted, is to not leave there without knowing whether or not it had spread. So
Was there only one lump in one breast?
there was only, at that point, as far as we knew.
Right, yeah.
So yes, at that point, and it was a tiny little mass. Dr. Weintraub Davis here in Bay Radiology Women's Imaging Center, actually, when she did the biopsy, she actually pulled it all out because it was only 4 millimeters. So she actually was able to get it with her needle biopsy. So there was really nothing left for them to pull out except for the surrounding tissue, just to make sure that there was no issues in the areas around it. Yeah, so they only knew about that one at that point.
And so where do you go from there? Did you have the surgery?
I had the lumpectomy and the revision of my lymph nodes. Did all that on that first trip out there.
Wow.
So exactly what I was kind of hoping would happen. They sent me home and they recommended that I do the genetics testing for the BRCA anomaly, and there's other genes too, but BRCA particularly, because I did have family history on my father's side of a lot of prostate cancer. My daddy has had it, both of his brothers had it, his daddy died of it, and BRCA is indicated for that. And my mother's side of the family, my great aunt died of ovarian cancer, and my mother's first cousin, who's kind of my aunt, I call her Aunt Tony, but anyway, she had very early onset breast cancer. But my mother's never had any problems, so we just didn't know. So we just didn't know. So we ran the testing. I was 100% sure it was going to come back to my dad's side. He ended up getting tested, and it's not him; it's from my mom's side. So,
oh man!
So
yes. they do test the family members.
Correct.
Then.
So I am BRCA2 anomalied, which means that everybody's genes, you have the specific codes. It's the same thing that causes autism. You're missing a piece or whatever. Mine is anomalied, which means that instead of my cells being able to recognize bad cells, it doesn't recognize them. Most people have it where the other cells will kind of band together and attack and sort of eat in a weird way bad cells, but I don't have that ability. So.
Right. So this is why you ended up with a double mastectomy.
Correct. So
is that all in that first week?
No. So
it's a lot.
I got the and the funny thing is that I'd gone back out there. I want to say it was like the end of January. So my surgery was like January 1st. I can't remember, but a week or so after we got out there. It was the Thursday after we got out there, the first surgery. And my friend Seal flew out back with me because they wanted to go ahead and do, they'd found some DCI, but not DC, ductal carcinoma, but not invasive in the areas around the original spot. And so they wanted to go in and do a little bit more cleaning up on the lumpectomy to make sure that they really got everything that was in there. And then, like I said, in the meantime, I'd done the genetic testing. So I went out with Seal. Tuesday, I had my appointment, my follow-up appointment, my pre-op basically with my breast cancer surgeon again and my oncologist. And then Seal and I went and had a really lovely lunch and pizza and a glass of wine, and then we were kind of shopping around in the area where we were staying. And I got a phone call from the geneticist, and they were letting me know that I was BRCA2 anomalied. And so at that point, it really does shut down because you're like, okay, I'm due to have this lumpectomy to clean all this up, but do I really want to go ahead and do a mastectomy? And I think that they're kind of taught not to encourage that, and I think because they want you to come to that on your own and not feel like that you were pushed to it. So I really couldn't get a definitive answer about what I should do from any of the surgeons. So I said, listen, I can't make up my mind because this was Tuesday afternoon, and then we kind of struggled with it all day on Wednesday, talking to a bunch of people. I mean, I talked to the surgeons, I talked to the geneticist, I talked to so many people who were trying to guide my decision making. And finally I said, you know what, I'm not going to make this decision right now. Is there any reason why I have to make it today about this surgery tomorrow? And they said, absolutely not. You can take as much time as you want. The cancer is out of you, the danger part is out of you, so we can wait. So I said, okay, I'm going to wait. In the meantime, between waiting, I went ahead and basically did a bunch of research, found a website that the geneticist recommended where you could plug in your age at onset, the type of cancer you had, just all the factors that were going on, what your anomalies were, all these things, and it gives you a percentage of the likelihood for a contralateral cancer to the other side or another cancer to reoccur. And so I want to say it was like an 80% chance of having a recurrence by the time I was 70.
Wow.
And then when you put in having a double mastectomy instead of just the lumpectomy, it came back to like practically zero of a recurrence.
And so that's when you made your decision.
It became a no-brainer at that point, correct.
Now, is this the BRCA gene you talk about that
Angelina
Jolie
yes,
had?
ma'am.
Yeah, the
It
actress.
is. It is. And I was fortunate in that I'd already done BRCA's, this type of BRCA. There's BRCA1 and BRCA2, and I'm BRCA2. BRCA2 is associated with breast, pancreas, prostate, skin, and ovarian. And so not even knowing that I had breast cancer, I'd had a full hysterectomy back in May of 2020. So it was, like I said, it was a very eventful year. And
that was coincidence.
Yes, it was total coincidence. So that was already out of me, which was good news. But yes, Angelina got everything taken out as a preventive measure.
Right.
Not unlike kind of what I was doing with the double mastectomy at that point. So.
All right, and how are you feeling? We saw some pictures. Maybe Spencer can pop some of those up when you can walk us through them a little bit.
Okay.
There you are in the hospital.
That was checking in, I think, for the first consult with the breast reconstruction surgery. That's me. You can see the things that are hanging around my neck. Those are things that they're things that hang around your neck that have Velcro ties, basically. When you have this kind of reconstructive surgery, you end up most of the time with drains.
Right.
And you end up with little balls on the end of them, and they're attached with strings, and you've got to carry them around with you. And so you end up with those.
Spencer, I think
things.
we have a picture. Yeah. That was the one you had shown before where that looks like they're on her lap. They look like two plastic
those are
containers.
those are the ends of the drains, and they're little plastic balls that are attached to the cord that are sticking into your body, and they're to make sure that you don't have fluid buildup on you. And they have to measure the amount of fluid that's being output.
And how long was that?
I had 8 drains to begin with.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That's a lot.
It was a lot.
Are you back in Panama City now doing this?
No, this is all in Anderson.
You stayed out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is all at Anderson. I went actually. I had a pretty decent break in between my lumpectomy and my mastectomy. My dad had actually had cancer, and so we had a family trip for spring break, which was the end of March, that I really, really wanted to go on because he had
Right.
not been able to go on the other trips. And so I asked them, I said, is there any reason why we can't schedule this, for me to come out here and do this March 31st? And they said, absolutely not. So there was a pretty decent break in between. Of course, this is the time of COVID too.
Right.
And so
was that a consideration when you were going through all this?
No.
Was your family able to come? You said they couldn't come initially.
No, like I said, the second time my husband stayed home with the girls. That was just the easiest thing. And when I went out there, and then this time I went out there by myself. And I have a very dear friend who I grew up with from New Orleans, and she lives in Houston. And so I went and stayed with her for my pre-op week prior to the mastectomy, and then I have a very dear friend here from Panama City who at the last second flew out there because, again, I didn't know exactly what kind of surgery I was going to do when I got out there. I hadn't had the consult with the plastic surgeon, the reconstruction guy, and so I didn't know what kind of surgeries were offered and what they could do for me until I got out there. And I ended up doing what they call a PAP, flap reconstruction, which is where they use your own tissue to rebuild your breasts. Rather than implants. I have an autoimmune disease, so I was concerned about putting plastic in my body. So that was a better choice for me. But I didn't realize that it wasn't just going to be a you get to go home surgery. It was usually, they say it's 5 to 10 days in the hospital when you do that kind of surgery, because they have to monitor all the flaps and make sure that they're staying alive with specific equipment and all these other things.
And this is what month? When is this happening?
This was, my surgery was March 31st.
Wow, that's pretty recent.
It was.
6-7 months. Now, we were looking at pictures of all your friends. Spencer, Mike, we could pop some of those up. That's your husband.
That's my husband.
How about that?
That's my friend Ashby from New Orleans that I stayed with on the front end. Yes.
How important was that support?
Huge, huge. I cannot even begin to tell you. That's me and my friend Seal. That was on when we were doing the when we were going to do the second revision on the lumpectomy. That's my friend Lori, the night before she dropped me off to go get everything cut off.
At a glance, it looks like
She's
you.
the one.
You could
People
be
have
sisters.
mistaken us for sisters, for sure. That's my dear friend, Dr. Tiffany Harris, who actually pulled out my last drain. That's at her house back here in Panama City. Okay. So I came home with drains. So that was that night. That's my friend Leah from Mobile, my oldest friend in the world. She came out and she helped, cleaned and did all the things and was just, it was just amazing.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. That's my dear friend Kim that I was talking about, that probably is the reason that I caught my cancer, because if she hadn't been a slacker, we might not have caught it. That's Leah and Tiffany. Tiffany also came out to Houston. So we kind of did a handoff. We staggered them. So it was like I'd have, one girl, there's Catherine Hester, she's from here. She came out to come relieve, and it was just great. Are
any of these women breast cancer survivors?
None of them.
None of them have had breast cancer.
None of them have had breast
cancer. Do
cancer.
they get mammograms now because of you?
They are very much reminded to, for sure, and I know that they know that the benefits of actually, the early detection has absolutely saved my life. I mean, like I said, if I really do believe it was a huge God wink that Kim was such a slacker, because it was so small that I'm not sure that they would have found it in October. So
people are commenting on. I'm looking to see if she's commenting, saying, "Stop calling out my name." You actually turned out to be a hero, Kim. So it's good. It's all good.
That was the dive trip that my family and I went on, and that's Ashby again.
How are you feeling though? Like physically, is your stomach sick? Now you didn't lose hair. You didn't do chemo. You didn't have to do that.
I got
on wood.
so lucky. Yes, I'm going to knock on wood, because I'm not out of the woods yet. I actually go back out to Anderson November 1st, and we're going to do some further testing and stuff just to make sure that nothing went anywhere else. What I haven't shared yet is that when they did the mastectomy, they did the pathology on both breasts to make sure that there was nothing anywhere else that they had just missed with the mammography. And they did miss something. I had a contralateral cancer already growing in my left breast. The first one was in my right. So, and to make matters even weirder, this one was estrogen driven. So
wow.
Yes. So I had both. So now I'm on tamoxifen and having to take that. But
well, you're a science project for
I am a science
for real.
Project,
I mean, you had a little bit of everything kind of thrown at you.
I did.
Inside your system.
I did.
But
it was very
you
weird.
look wonderful.
Well, thank you.
So you feel good now?
I feel fantastic. It's still. I mean, I can still tell that there was a surgery, and it's still. There's some discomfort, a little bit, but compared to going through chemo and radiation, I find myself very, very blessed. And it was because of, again, it was the early detection. It was the size of the tumor. If it had been 5 millimeters or more, they would have required me to do at least chemo, probably radiation as well. So, but maybe not the radiation with the mastectomy, but had I not had to have the mastectomy with just a lumpectomy, it would have been radiation as well.
Now, talking about family history, you have 2 teenage daughters.
I do.
So now, what happens for them? When it runs in the family, they say you have to get checked before you're 40.
Right. They actually, they just turned 18 in September, and so they can now make the informed decision and make informed consent about whether or not they want to be tested. They will be tested. They have chosen to do that. They want to be proactive and know what their health is. I highly recommend that. I did not just the basics, but I did all of the genome testing just to make sure that there was nothing else lurking out there. And I actually do have another anomaly, and it's CDH1, I think, which has to do with gastric cancers and that sort of thing. So I just was a good girl and went and got my endoscopy and my colonoscopy 2 weeks ago. So, yes.
And nothing? You're all
nothing.
clear?
I'm all clear. I'm good. I'm good.
I'm happy to
Knock
hear
on
that.
wood on that, too.
I know.
I'd like to stay that way.
You're quite an inspiration.
Well,
I mean, you have such a positive attitude about it, and I know, as you described, it was shocking to get that diagnosis, as I'm sure it is for everybody.
Absolutely.
But you just kind of pulled it together and said, I'm taking control of this.
Well, you either sit there on the floor of the hall of the office and cry and feel sorry for yourself, or you take action. And I'm kind of a no-nonsense gal, and I just felt like that the best thing for me was to just jump on it as quickly as possible and do what needed to be done to get it done. And so I did.
How's your husband been through all this? This has to be hard on the spouse.
He has been just a sweet treat. I mean, he has been so helpful and so supportive, and anything I need, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to stay here? What is your, he felt terrible about not coming out to Houston on the front end, because I told him back up to the consultation the week before for pre-op for the mastectomy. When I met with Dr. Largo, who is the reconstruction guy, and we decided on the heavy-duty surgery, and I found out that I was going to be in the hospital for quite some time. And Jim, they weren't allowed in. It was COVID, height of COVID, and you couldn't have a visitor. And so that's actually why Lori flew out there, because I didn't have anybody with me the weekend before, and my mother was threatening that she was going to get on the plane and fly out there, and she's got some mobility issues. And I'm like, that's the last thing we need, is worrying about you trying to get through an airport by yourself. And so I called Lori and I said, I hope that you were serious when you said you would do anything. And she said, absolutely. And I said, can you get on a plane? So she came out, and she's actually the sister-in-law of Mandy, who has been through breast cancer. And she actually took care of Mandy out in Houston when Mandy was going through some of her issues over the course of time. And so she was the perfect person to come out there and get my recovery place set up, all the things that I needed. We went and did, the Target run and got all the things that I was going to need in order to when I got out of the hospital, in order to recover and be in a safe, clean environment and all those things. And so she flew out and spent that weekend with me and got me prepared, and then drove me and dropped me off with my little bag at MD Anderson, and was bye, And she felt terrible. She's like, I hated it so much. I said, well, what choice do we have?
Nothing you can do.
Yeah.
No, we've heard that story several times. Yeah.
Right.
What do you say to women who are watching now who might not want that mammogram?
Please get your mammogram. Do what your doctors recommend. Please, please, please. Like I said, early detection is 100% key. If you catch it early enough, it is going to be a much better outcome. I'm living proof of that 100%. There's no question that the early detection saved me from having to go through the yuckiness of the chemo and the radiation issues. It really, really, really is just the best thing that you can do. And I joked with somebody earlier. I'm like, stay abreast of your breast health. So
it's a good way to remember.
I mean, for real.
And check for lumps at least once a month. And of course, that's why we do the buddy check once a month at News 13.
Right.
Well, Kelly, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and we appreciate you so much sharing your story.
It has been my honor 100% to be here, and I hope that people will listen and take heed and take care of themselves and not be in my position.
Kelly Roberson, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amy.
All right. I'm Amy Hoyt. Thank you for watching 13 Now. We'll see you next time.